In the steamy, vine-entangled jungles near Hill 55 in South Vietnam, where the humidity clung to skin like wet silk, and every step through the elephant grass whispered of death, the legend of a duel took form, not of armies but of wills, of one hunter tracking another in a shadow war fought under the canopy of war itself. Staff Sergeant Carlos Hathcock, known by the call sign White Feather, for the telltale plume he wore in defiance of death, had become a myth to the NVA, a phantom whose bullet whispered before it struck. Yet amid the jungle's rustling breath, stories filtered through the ranks of another phantom, a ghost woman cloaked in savagery, Apache. Her cruelty wasn't rumor but a symphony of screams, a sadistic signature left on the tortured bodies of captured Marines, mutilated slowly, methodically, beneath the jungle canopy. She didn't kill with haste, she unstitched men, piece by piece removing eyelids, ears, genitals, carving pain into language, all under the soft hiss of the monsoon and the terrified hush of men who feared capture more than death. She wasn't just an NBA sniper. She was a Psi warrior, an instrument of psychological mutilation. And for Hathcock, this wasn't about tally marks or glory. It was personal. The last man tortured by Apache had been one of his own, Corporal Denny Brewer, a soft-spoken kid from Arkansas with a laugh like a church bell. When his remains were recovered, it wasn't the death that gutted Hathcock. It was the deliberate preservation of pain, the hollowed eye sockets that stared through a face carved in silence. The mission was born that night, not in a command tent or under a general's order, but in the burning quiet of a sniper's heart. Find her. End her, not for vengeance, for mercy. Hathcock began alone, with no spotter, no unit, a ghost hunter tracking a ghost. He studied terrain like scripture, every elevation and depression, the bends in the river, the gullies where water pooled, the tree lines Apache might use as a shooting perch. He adjusted his scope not to the sun, but to her, because Apache shot at dawn and dusk. The witching hours where shadows moved like smoke and death was harder to see. He began sleeping in the day, crawling by inches at night, pushing his M40 rifle forward like a slow, purposeful extension of his will. He knew she was watching. He wanted her to. She would be hunting too, not with bloodlust, but with surgical patience. It was a war of mirrors, and Hathcock learned to become what he hunted, emotionless, patient, inhumanly still. He lay for days in a sniper's nest of crushed reeds and sweat-stained rock, moving only to sip water or relieve himself through a small hole dug beside him. The jungle tried to consume him. Leeches burrowed beneath his skin. Ants bit through his clothing. The sun boiled his flesh, but he endured, because somewhere out there was Apache, and every hour he waited was a stitch, unpicked in the tapestry of her brain. Then came the moment, a whisper of movement half a mile away, a glint, not of metal but of intent. The forest had an emotional language, and something shifted that morning. Hathcock saw her before she saw him, barely a flicker. A slow rise from the fern undergrowth, the silhouette of a woman, slender but coiled, her cheek resting against the scope of her Chinese-made Type 56 sniper rifle. She moved with grace and a predator's calculation, her gaze scanning the southern ridge. She was hunting too. And then, in the cruelest joke of fate, they locked eyes, through glass. Two scopes aligned, not with a bang, but with the eerie stillness of death, deciding who would take the breath and who would release it. Hathcock didn't hesitate. He exhaled. His finger was the last thing that moved. The bullet punched forward, not through flesh, but through her own scope, through the lens, through the retina, through the brain, a shot so perfect it would become the stuff of legend. But it wasn't triumph that filled him. It was silence. The jungle went quiet. The birds did not sing. The wind held its breath. He approached her body alone, unguarded, because he had to see the face, the myth, the human behind the monster. She lay not as a demon, but as a woman in her 20s, young, fierce, tattooed with tribal symbols along her wrists and neck. Her face was serene, frozen in a moment of surprise. A small journal was found in her satchel, written in careful Vietnamese script. A log of kills, but also poetry, haikus about death and fireflies, a mind twisted by ideology, by war, perhaps once brilliant, now shaped into a weapon. He buried her with his own hands. No report was filed. No photograph was taken. Back at base, he said nothing. He cleaned his rifle, drank water, slept for 2 days. When asked, he said only, "She won't be hurting anyone else." But inside him, something had shifted. The war hadn't ended. He would go on to many more missions. More kills, but this one became the marker. Not the most dangerous shot, not the hardest stalk, but the most human. In her death, Hathcock had glimpsed the mirrored soul of a sniper. The isolation, the calculation, the terrible intimacy of killing from a distance. She had been his reflection, his opposite, and perhaps, had she been born on the other side of the world, she might have been sitting beside him, spotting for him instead of dying by his hand. The war erased the lines, but in that shot, in that singular act of ghost killing ghost, something profound was etched into history, not in medals or citations, but in the silence of the jungle that morning. The sniper duel between Whitefeather and Apache didn't live in newspapers or briefings. It lived in the mythos of those who understood that war is not about winning. It is about surviving the cost of who you must become to win. And for Hathcock, that cost was never counted in bodies. It was counted in the ones he remembered.